Hello, everyone. Good morning again from Seattle. It's a bright, sunny morning today as well, perhaps a little overcast. It's around 8:30 a.m. here. I suppose it's about 8 p.m. or it's about 12 and a half hours away, so it's about 9 p.m. over there in Sri Lanka. So, as of now, the Election Commission has declared Andrew Dissanayake as the winner of this presidential election. The ramifications of this should be obvious to all. This is the first, I'm willing to argue that this is the first left wing government, the first left wing head of state. Let's not jump the horse, we haven't gone into the parliamentary elections yet. So let's just say that this is the first left wing head of state that Sri Lanka has seen since 1970 when Sirima Bandaranaike became prime minister for the second or third time. But a lot of the media analysis have focused on his left-wing credentials. They are basically describing and portraying him as a communist or a Marxist, without, of course, due reference to how much the politics of the NPP, or rather the JVP, the dominant party within the NPP, has changed over the last, I would say, 30 or 40 years, since 1994, when they entered the democratic mainstream, the parliamentary mainstream. It remains to be seen what the policies they have in mind are, because we've seen a lot of back and forth about those policy issues and policy positions. We've seen a lot of blowback and pushback from the main opposition, the SJB, regarding those policies, and we've seen a lot of disinformation about what the JVP, or rather what the NPP, is supposed to stand for. In fact, at the height of the election cycle last week or 2 weeks ago, we had prominent relatives of the SJB, even sections of civil society. Um, so it's supposed to be pluralist and tolerant, but they basically spread a lot of misinformation about the JVP about the NPP trying to nationalize education, ban private education, seize all your assets. Some even can, basically accuse them of being in cahoots with the incumbent, Ranil Wickremesinghe. But what it shows is, despite the fact that they were outspent and outpaced on many fronts, they still managed to get a lot of that anti-establishment, if not all of that anti-establishment vote this time around. In 2019, we had a similar issue pivoting on security concerns, which led Gotabaya Rajapaksa to his massive victory. But now it's a much more systemic and I would say systemic anti-establishment, or I would even go as far as to say anti-systemic vote. But again, when you look at most international media analysis, you come away thinking that Honorable Kumar Dissanayake is this communist utopian who's going to, reenact some of the experiments that the then Sri Lankan government enacted in the 1970s. That's not going to happen. There's going to be a major rupture and a major disruption in the political and economic trajectory of the country. I mean, consider, like I said before, this is the first left-wing head of state we've seen since 1970. But what we are going to see now is so on two fronts, it's going to be an interesting 5 years. We are going to see the NPP, I will say that JVP NPP, confronting the challenge of being in parliament. It's going to respond to this in many ways. We don't know how exactly it will respond to this, but in terms of the institutional and parliamentary and legislative framework that we have in this country, there's going to be a lot of adaptation that's going to come from the NPP. Whether the NPP adapts itself to suit that framework, or whether it will get that framework to suit its particular worldview, that's debatable. But either way, it's going to be a pretty interesting 5 years, because apart from a very brief period in 2004, exactly 20 years ago, ironically, the JVP, NPP, they have never been in power. They've never been the main opposition either. So we've basically seen the Tamil National Alliance becoming the head of the opposition on more than one occasion. by the Tamil National Alliance, I mean Tamil minority parties, but not the JVP and PP. So it's not in the opposition, it's in government, and many of its policies are considered radical and progressive enough to merit a second chance. Uh, I've talked about the IMF and I've talked about the our external relations. I don't think there's going to be a major disruption here. No country in the world is going to shun us just because a left-wing government is in power, because that's not how the world operates. But there's going to be a lot of challenges for the NPP domestically in terms of, number one, institutions that are hostile to left-wing interests, number two, civil society sections that have historically been liberal in outlook but liberal and pluralist ostensibly, but in reality opposed to the kind of left-wing radical progressive visions that the NPP has. And number three, from sections of the opposition and also the government, the current government, that will do all it can, that will do all they can to hijack the NPP's program. Already we are seeing disgruntled voices from the main opposition, the SJB, claims that even though 40+% of the country voted for it, 55+% of the country voted against it. Um, those claims are valid, but at the end of the day, there's no denying the spectacular rise that the spectacular, I would say, almost rags to riches story that the NPP has managed to bring about. A lot of the disgruntled voices are coming from those who expected a different result, either for Ranil Wickremesinghe or for the Samagi Jana Balawegaya. The latter, of course, has won it big in several northern and eastern areas, minority-dominated areas, which is to be expected given the fact that the JVP has had a very interesting and intriguing history with minorities, which I think that's the subject for a different discussion. But the fact is that the NPP, JVP is here to stay. What they will do in Parliament remains to be seen. They'll either have to dissolve Parliament. I don't know the exact constitutional framework for that, the basis for that, or they'll have to work with those who are in power. What does this mean? Obviously, they are not going to they're not going to go ahead with the SLPP, they are not going to go with the Rajapakshas, they are not definitely going to go with Ranil Wickremesinghe. Will they be open to cooperation with the SJB? That also remains to be seen, given the fact that there are so many differences between the two parties, especially over economic reforms. The NPP has moderated its stances on those reforms considerably since 2022. It no longer calls of exiting the IMF. It never did, as a matter of fact. There's only one party in the entire election cycle which actually explicitly called for an exit from the IMF, to the best of my knowledge. The NPP certainly didn't. And those who are claiming otherwise are just basically spreading some sort of disinformation. But at the end of the day, it's all going to be about compromise, it's all going to be about moderation, it's all going to be about moving to the center, because that's how Sri Lankan politics generally operates. The NPP was moving to the center long before the election, to be perfectly honest. We saw that in 2022 as well. But I mean, my final 2 cents on this would be, Sri Lanka is headed for a very interesting 5 years, and already we are seeing foreign officials from other countries and governments, including the UK, congratulating the government, the new Sri Lankan government. So there's no two words about it that Andukumar Dissanayake is the 9th executive president of the country. From here in Seattle, all I can do is wish all of us, you and me, Sri Lankans of all races and creeds and backgrounds, the very best. Expect more analysis in the future, but for now I'm signing off. Thank you.